My name is Christy Cox, and I want to talk to you today about the legalization of marijuana. The legalization of marijuana is a very touchy subject. People are usually 100% against it or 100% for it. And I want to tell you why I think everyone should be an advocate for the legalization of marijuana. What if you had a son who was sentenced 10 years in prison for possession of marijuana, but you had a daughter who was brutally raped or murdered, and her offender is serving less time than that? It's not fair. It's not something you want to think about, but it needs to be considered because hundreds of families go through this all the time. I also want you to think about a 2-year-old little girl named Addison Benton from Liberty Township, Ohio. She suffers from hundreds of seizures each day, and because marijuana is illegal in Ohio, her and her family are having to move to Colorado, where the medicinal use of marijuana is legal. And the reason why they're doing this is because the prescription medication she was prescribed by her doctor. Not only were they not helping her, but she was suffering severe side effects from them. That information came from an article in the Cincinnati Enquirer. Marijuana is illegal in most states. I believe it's 20 or 21 states now where the medicinal use of marijuana is legal. But it's still illegal in the rest of the United States. And there's a number of reasons why it should not be. Just like little Addison, many people suffer from certain illnesses and diseases that, if not be cured, they can at least be helped by the use of medicinal marijuana. The two most common illnesses are cancer and epilepsy, but it also can help with Crohn's disease, PTSD, other stress disorders, epilepsy, arthritis, all kinds of illnesses. If marijuana were legalized, it would reduce the risk of teenagers being exposed to other harmful drugs. Since they can't come to their parent or another trustworthy adult or go and buy it from a store, they're going out on the streets and buying it from legit drug dealers who are also selling crack cocaine, meth, and heroin. And sometimes these drug dealers lace the marijuana that they're selling to these teenagers, so they'll get addicted to it and come back and keep buying more. And also buying it off the streets, it introduces them to prostitution and gangs as well. Marijuana being illegal is far too expensive for our justice system. According to the High Times magazine, in 2009, 800,000 marijuana arrests were made. Can you imagine how much money was spent on convicting these so-called criminals? That money could have been used to catching the real criminals who are out there, killing people and raping people and robbing people. It was estimated that the U.S. spends more than $3 billion for arrest, jail costs, court costs, and marijuana eradication costs. That information came from the legalizationofmarijuana.com. People who are convicted of a marijuana charge suffer far more than they should. If you're 18 years old and you get caught with an ounce of weed, when you're 30 years old, you can't find a good job to support your family. You can't get accepted into a good college because you were considered a felon, even if you never touched marijuana a day after you got convicted when you were 18. And all that does is make the need to sell illegal substances to support your family even more. Hemp can be used for many things: biofuels, building materials, and that would produce more jobs. Marijuana arrest affects blacks and Hispanics more than anyone. So all that does is gives the idea that law enforcement is biased and prejudiced against minorities. Far too often minorities are arrested for marijuana use while whites and non-Hispanics face a much lower risk. That information also came from High Times. It's a common argument, but it's also an established scientific fact that marijuana is safer than alcohol and tobacco. And since alcohol and tobacco are legal and controlled substances, there's no reason why marijuana shouldn't be. It can be psychologically addicting for some people, but the potential of addiction is far less than the addiction to alcohol or tobacco or other prescription drugs. And that information came from livescience.com. Marijuana being illegal does more harm than it does good. President Jimmy Carter acknowledged Penalties against drug use should not be more damaging to an individual than the use of the drug itself. Nowhere is this more clear than in the laws against the possession of marijuana in private for personal use. And that goes back to people who get convicted when they're 18 years old and 30 years old, they're still suffering from it. Marijuana should be regulated and tightly controlled and at least be considered for medical marijuana use. There should be smoking and non-smoking sections like there are for cigarettes. And there should be places where it is acceptable and places where it's not acceptable, like there is alcohol. You can literally help save a life by becoming an advocate for legalizing marijuana. Imagine being able to say, yeah, that little girl down the street, I helped her get her right to take her medicine freely wherever she wants without having to sacrifice something. Imagine that being your daughter. Or imagine your child or grandchild not having to serve more time than a rapist or a murderer in prison. And if marijuana were taxed, that money could help support other criminal justice and social programs. That also came from High Times magazine. You can help take a stand in Mississippi. Talk to your Mississippi House and Senate, and visit and like the Facebook page Mississippi Alliance for Cannabis, and become an advocate for legalizing marijuana.